This is the ZMAR Podcast. Elite Benefits of America helps small and mid-sized companies with their health insurance programs. And now, your host, Butch ZMAR.
Employers face decisions, tough decisions every single day, whether it's revenue, taxes, expenses, payroll, marketing. Obviously, you got to generate sales, and then legal, right? Most of the time, entrepreneurs, partners, they usually get it wrong and they learn from it, right? Well, at least some of us do, right? And then other ones could just keep making the same mistake. But that could be the reason why that 80% of businesses fail every year, and half of them will fail in the first 5 years that they're in business. And then less than 10% of those businesses that make it will ever get over $1 million in revenue. There's many reasons this happens, and we're going to dive into a handful of them, and we're actually going to connect to the same mistakes to the benefit programs that people make on a regular basis, but somehow they keep failing at their benefits program, yet maybe they're still learning in business, and that's why they've been able to last as long as they have. The first one is no business plan, or the lack of planning, right? And so many shoot in the dark from the hip, if you will. They're not driving the sales they need. Maybe they're spending too much, or some other combination of both. Sometimes they're not given a target, or they're going after the wrong target and they're unprofitable. But there's many businesses that don't have a target, and so therefore they just end up in the middle of nowhere and not sure which way to go, or where they're going to go, or where they're going to be, or anything, right? And so the same goes with benefit programs in the workplace. There's no plan or strategy or anything, and usually starts out, and this is the goal or target, is usually the partners or the owner of the company or board of directors or somebody key in the company needs health insurance. And so they go out and they seek this and they meet that need, and then they have health insurance, right? And they just kind of wing it, right, at that point, and like most businesses do. And in the end, they end up failing because they're didn't think the strategy, they thought their own strategy was going to last this long, and now it's not. You definitely need a plan or a roadmap from point A to B, and stick to the course. Keep in mind that benefits and business programs need a plan in order to keep going. And if you think about it, if the masses are doing it certain ways, and that's what a lot of businesses do, the masses of the business, so most businesses are doing the exact same thing, and they think that they're going to get different results. And most of the time in the benefits program, there is no plan other than just get through this renewal. So then we have ineffective sales or marketing strategies. All right. Many businesses fail because of this. We have clients that struggle, and there's days where I wonder if we should get into business consulting to help them out. But many don't even have a strategy. They kind of just throw spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks, and not really figure out what's working, what's not working. They're approaching the marketing wrong in most cases, or they're not marketing at all. Or they become a jack of all trades, right? So they take on anything that has money and somebody needs something, and then they take it, and then they realize in the end, over a period of time, it's just bad business because you're taking on the people or businesses that you don't align with, and they become unprofitable. They go with what's easy, and easy has the problems, right? The sales aren't right. There's no sales at all. And this happens even, as in the benefits industry, all right? And so, or insurance sales in general, they just go with what's easy. And they just say, well, I'm just not getting the sales, not getting what I need, whatever. They just go the easy route. With the benefits program in the workplace, they approach the same way, right? And it's usually the wrong strategy, or no strategy at all. They just think that, well, I'll just go with the big purple company and I think I'm going to be good, right? Why not? Everybody else has got them, right? They kind of just get the renewal, they cover their eyes up, they kind of complain and kick and scream, and then they jam the paperwork in the drawer and try to forget about it. This is not a strategy, but this happens every time there's a renewal, or for most businesses. And again, if the masses are doing it, it's not much of a strategy, right? And so to give you a kid analogy, there's that movie, The Incredibles. There's that part where Mr. Incredible runs into Syndrome, which makes firearms and other devices for obviously the government and war and other people that have the money to spend with them. But he creates these superpower devices that, and he sells them to people. And he says, at some point when everybody's super, then nobody's super, right? So if everybody's doing the same exact thing, and most of them are receiving the same results you are, is that really the good strategy to work with? Businesses usually overlook any legal or compliance issues. I'm not an attorney. I'm not trying to give legal advice. But we do know that in the element of business, right, we know that there's legal items that have to be discussed and have to be taken care of in the business. It could be trademarks, patents. It could be employee laws like the Department of Labor. There's a lot we have to follow, and we're just forced to, right? And in the business world, most of the time, whatever the cost is, almost whatever the cost is, you just take care of it, right? So if there's certain things that you need and hire employees, you take care of it. If you come up with a widget, you do a little homework to make sure that it's not a similar widget to something else. I mean, there's things that have to be done, otherwise you'll get crushed. So more or less, the businesses try to stay legal. Most of them give it the good old college try, right? There's an effort behind it, and they do fairly well with it, right? At some point, when they generate enough revenue with the sales, they'll hire an attorney to help track a lot of that stuff. That's very common. But with benefits, these employers, a lot of them throughout the entire country, they avoid this compliance item when it comes to HR and benefits. They just do. Yes, it usually costs money, and they really don't want to mess with it. They rather just avoid it. They ignore it, but eventually they do get caught, right? It could be the pre-tax document from the IRS. They call the 125 document. It could be the RISA wrap document. This is way overlooked. There are penalties involved for not having that. Employee handbook, not the employee handbook itself, I don't believe is the actual requirement, but items in the employee handbook are required by law, federal and local. And so that could be painful if you don't have that up to date. And then recently in Illinois, and I'm sure other states too, again, I'm not giving HR advice on this podcast, but there's PTO tracking requirements. So for a certain number of hours worked, you have to give paid time off, including part-time employees that usually don't get paid PTO. And so, but how are you going to keep up with that? There's businesses I've talked to, even though that just happened, there's businesses I talked to locally in Illinois that never heard that went on. And so you just got to keep track. But by avoiding all this, it really could end up bankrupting the company, the owners, the directors, whoever's involved for any small, mid-sized company. Large company could probably stomach the pain a little bit, but they probably have enough cash flow to hire consultants and professionals to help cover their tracks to make sure that they're fully compliant and up to speed with the law. Failure to adapt innovation or technology, and this is big because we have clients that are still doing things by retail transactions by paper. Remember the old receipt book where you handwrite the customer's name, what the service is or product, and then they manually with a calculator add up the totals. Some are actually still writing checks for payroll. I think that's few and far between, but I do believe it's actually going on. I've actually seen client lists in a ledger book, and some have moved to putting it in Excel, but there's a lot of acceleration when it comes to becoming more proficient in a CRM or customer relationship manager. You could keep a lot more data and notes, and you could even put notes in there about your customer or client that may be relevant later. It could be product related or personally related, like their kid plays baseball, birthdays, whatever it might be. You could put that in there. You can't put all that data easily, and you could put it in an Excel sheet, I guess, but there's a lot to read there. And so CRM just makes it a little bit easier, but businesses definitely avoid all this technology. And then you got automation too, internal and external. So internally would be about processes and workflow management. Externally could be marketing, such as automated drip campaigns and customer service bots, especially with AI. And so there's a lot of technology there. So with benefits, there's a lot of companies that prefer the PDFs and printouts and big room open enrollments, and it's actually really gone away with the past. But a a lot of companies still do this. A lot more than people using paper receipts for retail sales transactions. But what this does is lead to employees to have less confidence in their employer in a lot of ways. And then it becomes less productive, right? Because they don't have the confidence that things are being done right because everything's being winged in the benefits program. And that happens a lot. They leave the company losing out. The owner loses out on opportunity because of the talent they just lost. HR or you as the owner or whoever you appoint is wasting a ton of valuable time checking paperwork to make sure there's no missing information and chasing the employees to get the information that they didn't put on the application. And the issue has been going on is that a lot of employers have been pushing that back on us. And in fact, some of them said, well, why can't you call the employee? Well, you know what? They don't work for us, right? We're here to help and manage a benefits program. Our job is not to communicate with the employees. That's their job. Now, can we help them provide resources and tools to make that happen? Absolutely. We have those at our disposal. Our job is not to chase employees and get this information right. It is your job as the employer, HR, office manager, whoever's appointed for this at the company. It's not the wild, wild west for employees to reach out to the benefits firm. It doesn't work that way. They don't work for us. You certainly wouldn't do that with other professionals. So let's say there's a payroll issue and you're not going to have them call your accountant to fix an employee payroll issue. It's going to go to whoever's in control, and then whoever's in control there will call the accountant or payroll provider. They're not contacting those companies direct, or the personnel for that matter. You lose money, everything gets lost, and productivity goes down the tubes, right? So there's technology pieces in the benefit program that eliminate a lot of this. They can't advance to the next screen without putting information in. The only thing that we have to worry about, I guess, in some ways, is that there are employees that assume that if they put their own personal information in there as an employee and not their spouse and family, that their spouse and family is still insured. Obviously, if this is news to you, you have to list everybody on the policy that needs to be insured. And so we run into that a lot. And all of a sudden, they have the open enrollment. January 1st, they have coverage. And the first week of January, their spouse is trying to get medical coverage for one of the kids for maybe sicknesses or something. And they find out there's no coverage. Well, because the employee didn't put it in there. But outside of that, it checks the box. The same thing with employer paperwork. It's a big nightmare for us, and employers don't understand how to fill out these forms, partly because they don't sit down with their cup of coffee and actually try to read the thing, because it's not hard. It's not rocket science. It's not coded for any reason. You just got to sit down and fill in the boxes. So, even we use technology to try to make sure nothing's missed on those, and it tends to help. So let's talk about financial mismanagement and lack of data. I'm putting these two together. I've read articles where these are actually technically separate, but for the cause of benefit programs, I'm just going to put them together because they're actually very much alike. It's about money in and money going out. That's it, right? And so is a benefits plan. And when you talk about funding the healthcare and then expensing the healthcare, and we'll get to that. But you could have $100 million in sales in a company, but if you spend all of it or more, you're not going to be out of business in a very short period of time, right? So you have to have financial means and as well as data to look at and say, okay, where am I at? So there's data that you see, like a lot of times businesses will use profit and loss statements or balance sheets to kind of look at it. And you could actually do benchmarking for your company as well. And so there's data that kind of figure out where you're at, where your margins are at. And obviously you would do that with product lines. So manufacturing could pull reports and figure out input and outputs, like productivity based on volume. It could be based on margins. It could be, cost analysis. There's so much data. If you're not using the data, you're going to go bust. And then you need to put those resources and the money and the time to those things to actually make it occur. Because what happens is some businesses will invest into the resources and then never use it anyway. So there's always this lack of initiative to actually use what's available. Some of them in the benefits program will actually be available to you at no charge. The problem we face all the time is that when there's no money involved, they have less interest, less everything, and it's there to actually make their job better, easier, and more efficient, and yet they avoid it because they don't have skin in the game. But in a benefits program, a lot of things are not transparent, and healthcare in general. You can't get data, and that's unfortunate, and they play the system their way on that. You have no idea if you're overbilled, overcharged, duplicate charging. Even myself, I had a recent situation. I had 2 kids that went to urgent care, and it's only because I was dealing with the bills, but this was a while ago in the winter months that they went on the same day, coincidentally, and we went to urgent care because we couldn't get a doctor to get an antibiotic, and they were billed the same way, same date, everything, but the provider didn't made it clear, at least on the invoices, which was which. And then they had multiple things scrolling. So they actually put on the invoices, they actually cross-reference the billing between these 2 kids on both invoices. And so it got really confusing, even for myself, to figure out which bill was supposed to be paid. I did pay it, but come to find out that they were actually, they put a final notice they were going to send collections, and that's why I called them. And I'm like, well, this is stupid because you guys are duplicating everything. How do I know that I'm not overpaying on this? And they just told me, well, we wouldn't do that. Of course you would. You would do it by accident, if anything. And so that's just from the claim perspective. But employers could actually get claim reports from health plans. Now, if your plan doesn't provide you a claim report, then you need to figure out a different way. If it is, how much information is actually provided? That's the issue, because fully insured plans will give claim data, but may not be as much as a self-funded, because you have all the faucets and levers to pull. And so therefore, if you have more control to where the data is given you references for, you could actually control the outcomes a little bit more. You might be able to control the expenses better, just like you would do inside the workplace. The benefit programs still have something similar. It's almost like these employers enjoy blindly spending money, giving your employees an unlimited credit card for the company, and just say, just do whatever you need, and I'll just complain about the bills when it comes in, but I'm still going to pay it, right? That's essentially what they're doing. They just give up all control, but you have to control this thing. In a recent lawsuit, and I'm not sure all the details on it, but there was a big company in Chicago. It's regional to this area, but I think they ship all over the globe, that has Aetna as their insurance companies, and through some investigation, they found out that Aetna was funneling cash to hide it from the employer. And so you have to look at these claims data, see where the money's going, because they just got caught their hand in the cookie jar, because they were basically money laundering in some ways. And I'm only using it as a generic term. I'm not an attorney. I didn't read everything in the full extent of what was in the court case, but you can go read it for yourself. But how would you know, right? How would you know? How would you know that you have even invoices coming from the insurance company that you're not looking and reviewing? We have employers that we remind them all the time. Finally, they sit down and look over their invoices. There's employees on here that never were employed by the company. And the insurance company has no idea how they got on there, but they've been paying for them for months. Now, the insurance company did right, and they gave full credit for those employees because they figured it out that they weren't, and they got accidentally put on those invoices. But you need to check this stuff. You cannot assume that things are going on, and it's going to cost you money, and it could bankrupt you. And then many times, in defense of our own industry and how we taught our employer clients how to shop for insurance, is we focus so much on how to fund the healthcare. There's tons of insurance brokers that move employers to self-funded plans, and that's fantastic because you have more control, whatever. But it might be still outside the league of that insurance broker. But you move them over to have more control, and they focus so much on the funding side of it, but expenses are still out of control. Like, how do you control this thing, right? And so you have to control the expense side. You can't do that without data. Companies refuse to pivot, and obviously it's a common buzzword, especially with COVID behind us. You had to pivot during COVID to stay in business. That happened a ton for a lot of businesses. Employers, partners, office personnel, salespeople, they get in their own way. They could be producing more, have better outcomes, help more people, get products in their hands, services accomplished. But they get in their own way. There are times where they just feel like they don't want to move too fast, and then they're too busy doing other things to get back to other things. They just get in their own way, right? So they are afraid of moving, right? They were afraid to do things. They're afraid to move away from what they're currently doing, and it's something different, right? Like, wait, I've been doing it the same way for so long. But a great analogy to this is Motorola. And there was an era where analog radio was big, and analog radio is still there, but it's moved more digital. And Motorola, when the digital radio was starting to come out, they were so big in the analog space that they decided, you know what, this isn't going away. We have way too much market share for it. It was huge. There was really no competitors. And when the digital era started to boom, Motorola didn't. They actually started losing market share. They disregarded it as the next trend, and they end up losing market share. They're the smallest they've ever been. I don't even really know, actually, the timing of this podcast, if they really exist in some capacity. I maybe in name only. I'm not 100%. I just know that they lost a ton of market share. The same thing happens with benefits plans. They're afraid to move. They've been doing it the same way. We've had this carrier for 20 years. My grandfather told me never to change plans. All about faith in these traditions to just stay, right? And they are the mainstay, right? But again, it goes back to that analogy. If everybody else is doing it and they're having the same problems, should you be doing something different? But they're so focused on these traditions way more than money. They're so loyal of giving their money to certain branded insurance companies that they won't look at anything else. They just say, well, they're the best. Well, what makes them the best, right? By charging you more. And if I guarantee, if you had vendors that were charging you more, they wouldn't make them best anymore. You would look at other avenues to control cost, because you got to stay in business. You got to make a profit. You have shareholders, even if you're the only shareholder. Like, there's a number of things. So they just hold on to this loyalty and belief and that things are just going to work out just fine. And sometimes it doesn't. We recently switched an employer plan from one insurance company to another, and we stay with the branded carriers. And this is no real fault of the branded carriers, but just to give you an example of they wanted to switch. They had a couple employees that wanted that new carrier, and they were going to save money in the meantime. So the employer's like, well, this makes sense. I'm going to save thousands of dollars by making the switch. We don't really give up that much in coverage. Finally, claim time occurs. They're not willing to cover a certain medication one of the employees' families were doing, and so that creates an issue. There's in this case, I think it'll work out just fine. But I'm just saying that so much for loyalty at that point when it just blows up, right? So how much could you really be saving if you decided, I'm going to take baby steps, if anything, and start moving and pivoting towards other options to save the money? Because sometimes you're gonna be faced with, or at some point, right, if you're in business long enough and healthcare costs keeps going up, you're gonna have to make this executive decision on whether or not you stay open and give up on the health insurance, or you're going to not give up on the health insurance because you're too pig-headed, and then have to force to shut your doors and there's no revenue anymore, and then you're done. And there's many employers out there that have already been down this path. This isn't anything new. It just may not be your neighbor, your grandparents, your brother's business. They may not have made the move, but there's tons of other employers out there that made this move. They put together the right programs. They attack the pricing and expense column of the ledger, and they address everything they can over a period of time. This is a long game, not a short game. You're not going to save 30% in the first year and expect it to stay. It's going to increase every year. But how do you control that and have more predictable outcomes? And employers have a hard time. One of the reasons they have a hard time with their benefits renewal is because it wasn't predictable. You have no idea what it is. It just shows up in the mail and says, hey, by the way, since there's cost of services in the area that are going up, we're going to have to increase your premiums, right? and it's all hogwash. But and they hide so much. They're supposed to disclose that more now with the Consolidated Appropriations Act, but no one's seen anything yet. And so they just kind of throw it at you. No wonder you get frantic, pull your hair out. You hate the process that you have to go through. And sometimes you feel like the broker community is just driven off of commissions. They don't really care, which is not necessarily true. I would disagree with that. But because we have to get paid for our time anyways. But I'm just saying that if you had more predictable outcomes, you could the CFO or the owner could actually project what that increase is going to be and plan for it. And they should be doing that now. They already have a history. The average Affordable Care Act plan in Chicagoland area has increased anywhere between 8 and 12% on average since the inception of Affordable Care Act. I don't agree with that because the profit margins have increased for those insurance companies. CEOs and presidents are getting pay raises. So I think they could figure something else out. But why? When the system is geared towards them making more money. And so you could predict what those outcomes. You could do that this time, this renewal, mid-year review. For sure, you could analyze what and anticipate what those costs are going to be. You can't blindly just go into it and cover your eyes and pretend that nothing is really going to happen, or you hope for change and then you hold your breath and find out that it didn't work anyways. So these are just some examples, 6 that I gave you, why businesses fail in the short term. They don't make it that far, but also benefit programs fail even if you still have it.